Hey everybody, it's Abishur Prakash, aka Mr. Geopolitics. In this episode of Predictable versus Unpredictable, we'll be looking at US President Donald Trump's latest call with Putin and what this says about the future of the Russia-Ukraine war. In US President Trump's latest call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, little was achieved. This was a call that was held by the US president with the leaders of Russia and Ukraine separately in the context of once again attempting to bring this war to an end, attempting to push through some kind of ceasefire, except nothing happened. Now, the US being unable to bring the Russia-Ukraine war to an end was predictable. This is something that I've been warning about for at least 6 months, where the US ability to call the shots in the world has eroded to a dangerous point where the flashpoints in the world have passed the point of no return, and where the incentive for nations, be it Russia, be it countries in the Middle East, be it countries in Asia, the incentive for governments to not go to war, to not get bloody, to stay reliant and integrated with the global system remains at a low point. That incentive has been dying for some time now. So all the conditions for war are lining up. Existing wars like what's taking place in Europe and the Middle East, and new wars like what many are fearful of happening in Asia. So the US being unable to end the Ukraine-Russia war was predictable. Trump campaigned on ending this war within 100 days. This hasn't happened. In fact, the Ukraine-Russia war is in a worse position today than it ever has been, as reflected by the Operation Spiderweb, which took out a significant amount of Russian strategic bombers, or the fact that now for the past week, the Russians have successively launched their largest attack on Ukraine, one after the other, employing hundreds of drones and hundreds of ballistic missiles. So all of this points to the Ukraine-Russia war heading into far more volatile territory, where ceasefire and peace become less and less likely. Now comes the unpredictable, and there are three key aspects when it comes to the unpredictable. The first has to do with the United States itself. If Trump believes that he cannot end the war, then it pushes the US towards one of two paths. The first path is what Vice President J.D. Vance said, which is that the US could simply walk away from the war, walk away from diplomatic efforts, walk away from ceasefire attempts. Whether this means the US also cuts aid to Ukraine remains up in the air, but the US may see diplomacy as futile and simply move from being on the field to being an observer. Or the US may take the second path, which is to double down and help Ukraine. Now, the US under President Trump has been far more skeptical, far more reserved about sending more aid to Ukraine, but at the same time, the US has been open to other kinds of strategies to help Ukraine indirectly. One of these strategies is to go after Russia economically. A bill in the US calls for 500% tariffs on nations that buy Russian energy. And this specifically targets countries like China, countries like India, countries like Turkey that remain reliant and remain open to Russian energy imports. Now, this was at one point laughable. Now, Trump has almost given his approval, indirect approval for this bill. It's a still long ways to go before this bill actually passes, but the fact that it's gaining support in the US reflects how Washington may go after Moscow in support of Ukraine, go after Moscow economically, and begin to sever Russia's remaining economic links in the world. So the big question right now, the big unpredictable aspect has to do with what the US does next if it believes diplomacy is not going to lead to anything in the near term. Second is Russia's position economically. There is no doubt that Russia is in a very strong position vis-a-vis the Ukraine war. Russia is advancing. Russia is has been able to sustain this war now for 3 years, despite all of the predictions and all of the experts warning that Russia's economy will collapse. Russia is continuing its war effort under the barrage of 24,000 sanctions. Russia is the most sanctioned country on earth. It's the largest sanctions barrage in all of history. Yet, at this point, after 3 years, Russia's economy is now showing signs of very real weakness. Russian coal companies are asking the government for bailout. Russian manufacturing is down double digits since the Ukraine war began. A top Russian official is warning that the country is on the verge of recession. Russia is not where it was just 6 months ago. Russia may be winning the war against Ukraine, but Russia is not able to sustain this war indefinitely anymore. And this means that Russia may turn more towards China and North Korea. A new report suggests that the Chinese foreign minister told his EU counterpart that China cannot afford for Russia to lose the Ukraine war. And now North Korea is sending 30,000 new troops to aid Russian forces in Ukraine. So the Sino-Korean Russian alliance is moving upwards on the ladder, and we could see new arrangements, new setups between these three governments as they cannot afford for Russia to lose the war, as Russia seeks to bolster its position. The last unpredictable aspect has to do with Europe. Europe has been standing by Ukraine since February 24th, 2022, when the Ukraine war began, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine began. This has been an all-weather approach, an unshakable support. But now Europe faces new internal splits. The Slovakian foreign minister has proposed that the international community forgives Russia's actions. Meanwhile, Denmark is calling for Hungary's voting rights to be stripped. This is new internal rifts between European states that Brussels may view as unacceptable, that Brussels may view as acting as dangerous to the future unity of the bloc, as coming in the way of other initiatives that the EU wants to pursue, including sustainability. So this is a different set of conditions for Europe to navigate, and it comes at a moment where if the US decides to walk away from ceasefire attempts, from diplomacy, to significantly reduce its exposure and aid to the Ukraine war, then the onus of responsibility will fall on European states, specifically the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland. These nations will have to carry the bulk of the financial and military aid. But if they view this kind of support as coming in the way of the unity in the bloc, of the bloc deteriorating into some kind of internal strife and tension where nothing else can be achieved, then Europe itself may also change its position towards the Ukraine war, towards Kyiv. And this is another unpredictable aspect. I hope you resonated with this episode of Predictable versus Unpredictable. Leave your comments below and talk soon.